Thank you. Thank you for the fantastic introduction. And I see we have a relatively full room. That fills me with joy. So today I'm here to talk to you about Red Hat's path to post-quantum cryptography and where OpenSSL has helped us along with this path. This is a quantum computer, in case you've never seen one, right? Apparently a lot of people have not, so I always include this picture in my slide. This particular model is built by IBM. The actual chip that does the computing sits at the very bottom here, and it's super cool to a fraction above 0 Kelvin. So we know that Shor's algorithm in theory breaks public-private key cryptography. We've known that for a while. I think Shor's algorithm was in 1980s or something. But quantum computers are probabilistic and they have physical problems, they have error rates. At the moment, I think this quantum computer has around 150 qubits with a 0.3% error rate. Some estimates say we need about 4,000 error-free qubits, so in reality probably 24,000 physical qubits or even more. So that transition will take years. And now the obvious follow-up question is, why do we even care about post-quantum cryptography if this will take years and it's not even clear that it will happen in time yet? So at the moment, nobody can really predict when this Q day, this day when somebody will have a cryptographically relevant quantum computer will happen. But from the perspective of a commercial vendor like Red Hat, I would argue it does not matter. This is the slide that's supposed to explain to you why. This particular timeline that you see here is published by the NSA. They write standards that governmental computing systems need to comply to, and they have transition timelines. Now, one could say, okay, this is the position of the NSA, but it really is not. Others, like in the EU, there's similar standards. The UK has some, Canada has them, Australia has them, Japan has them, South Korea has them. Essentially, all around the globe, governments are deciding that this transition is something that eventually needs doing. Like the NSA has some pretty tight timelines on this, where they say by 2025, for some use cases, post-quantum cryptography should be used by default and preferred. We have always interpreted that as by the end of 2025, and we're sort of on track to meet that deadline. But pretty much everybody requires a transition by 2035. So this is not a problem that we can ignore as a commercial vendor because our customers are demanding that we do this. Right? And that brings me to what we're covering today. So I'll start out comparing the RHEL release timelines to this transition timelines and why does this matter for us right now. And then I'll go into what post-quantum cryptography we have in RHEL 10, what are we bringing in CentOS 10 Stream? What are we doing with signatures over RPM packages? That's a big topic as well. Short excursion into post-quantum cryptography and FIPS mode, if you're the sort of government agency that demands that. And I'll wrap it up with post-quantum cryptography in hardware security modules and how we can interact with those. So this is very roughly the RHEL 10 timeline. It was released in 2025, and its support horizon is way beyond 2035. It's probably even 2040. It's not really set in stone yet, depending on how much money people are willing to give us. So if we take this timeline and put right next to it the timeline of post-quantum cryptography, like the ML-DSA and ML-CAN standards were published in August 2024, we still do not have final standards for the use of post-quantum crypto in TLS, but that does not stop everybody from already implementing it. But also, these standards are probably pretty close to final, and I would expect them sometime in 2026 or maybe 2027. So we're getting there. But then also, we saw on the last slide, regulators require this by 2030 or 2035, which means we are stuck between a rock and a hard place. Either RHEL 10 becomes obsolete faster and we need our customers to move to RHEL 11, or we need to add post-quantum cryptography support to RHEL 10 to make the entire lifetime of it actually worthwhile to use, right? And that's why we've been experimenting with this. And like we saw on the slide before that RHEL 10.0 came out before post-quantum cryptography was standardized in TLS. TLS is still not standardized, but it also came out before OpenSSL had implementations of that. So what we have done is, as a technology preview for people to test this, is we packaged OQS provider, graciously provided by the Open Quantum Safe project and liboqs, and plugged that into OpenSSL 3.2.2 that we were shipping. And that allowed us to provide hybrid key exchange in TLS and pure ML-DSA, if that is something that you want to use. Now, this is all non-default. You need to install an additional package, DNF install crypto policies PQ preview, and we made sure that the name sounds sufficiently scary so that people do not use this in production, because it's technology preview, even though all the marketing material did not necessarily go into that particular detail. And then we have crypto policies. That is a mechanism that exists in Fedora and CentOS and RHEL to configure system-wide policies on what we consider usable and acceptable cryptography. And you can use update crypto policies to enable this test PQ module, and that will then enable the hybrid key exchange and pure ML-DSA support. Right. This would not have been possible without the OpenSSL provider architecture, because we would not have been able to add algorithms that OpenSSL did not know anything about in version 3.2.2. So for us, this was only possible because of providers. A big win. We could not have done this with any of the OpenSSL forks, for example. Right. Now, looking ahead, CentOS 10 Stream is what's going to become the next RHEL minor release. So if you look at at CentOS 10 Stream now, you will see what we'll ship in RHEL 10.1. And there's a pretty major change in there, and that is that we will enable post-quantum cryptography by default in RHEL 10.1, and it's now enabled in CentOS 10 Stream if you want to go test it. OpenSSL has been updated to version 3.5.1. And there is a crypto policies knob to disable it, if that's something that you would want, if you're more conservative. But we think it's okay to ship it by default, and we will support it. We also kicked off an effort across the entirety of RHEL to test for post-quantum crypto support in TLS in all the various TLS clients and servers that we have. We checked for key exchange, we checked whether ML-DSA certificates are supported, and we checked whether those clients and servers supported dual stack setups where you can have an RSA certificate and an ML-DSA certificate and get the one that your client supports, depending on what it announces in the TLS client hello. So on that, not every component is there yet in having full support, but we made a good deal of progress and identified a bunch of components where this wasn't working very well, and we have already fixed a number of them. So we're making good progress towards that to essentially make post-quantum crypto in TLS a solved problem by RHEL 10.2 probably. Now, one of the good things of this transition is that the code that people have written against RHEL 10.0, against OQS provider, continues to work. And that is not an accident, right? We actually checked for this. We wrote tests for it. We did the rebase of OpenSSL and then ran the tests, saw that they were failing, and then we approached the OpenSSL upstream, added a few aliases to make sure that that still continues to work. But this is a big win. OpenSSL's provider API, it allows us to write code on the application side that does not care which implementation ends up being used. The code is independent of whether the actual PQC implementation was in OQS provider or is now in OpenSSL's own provider. So for us and for our customers, this is good because they could test this with 10.0, and when 10.1 rolls around, their code continues to work, but instead of tech preview, it's now fully supported. Right. Right. Let's move on to the next problem that we're solving. If you remember the CNSA 2.0 timeline slide, one item on there was essentially TLS. It's called Web Browsers and Cloud Services in their nomenclature. But there's also another item on there that is software signatures. And they also want to transition software signatures by the end of 2025. So for us, that means how do we sign our RPM packages with post-quantum crypto signatures. Now, fortunately, there is an IETF working group that works on adding post-quantum crypto support to OpenPGP, and OpenPGP is what we use to sign RPMs. RPM used to have its own implementation based on OpenSSL for verification, but that that implementation was very brittle, and it honestly kind of ignored most of the OpenPGP package and just did the absolute minimum necessary to verify the signature. And we don't think that was a good situation, so that has now been replaced with a backend based on Sequoia PGP, which is a Rust-based OpenPGP implementation, and this is just much cleaner, much more feature-rich, and we have a lot more confidence in it than in RPM's verification implementation before. For signing, we were typically using GNU-PG, but GNU-PG is in the situation that it has broken away from the IETF standardization process and has forked its own version of the OpenPGP standard, is now calling it LibrePGP, and is incompatible. And they're also working on some PQC support, but it's not the PQC that we would want because of our government customers. So essentially, there's this huge split, and we don't think that GNU-PG is going to work for our purposes in the future. Like the verification backend already transitioned to Sequoia PGP. We're also going to transition the signing to Sequoia PGP, and for that we are funding support. We are actually funding to add PQC support to Sequoia PGP. We have a contract ongoing to make that happen, and it should. Essentially, it's in pretty good shape right now. As soon as the standard drops, and that will get merged and will be released. Like this work that we're funding, it also uses OpenSSL as the primitives. Like we didn't want to re-implement ML-DSA. That made no sense to us because eventually we will have to certify one of those libraries, and we always want to have a certified implementation of these primitives available. So we're using OpenSSL as the backend for the Sequoia work, which is not the default. The default for Sequoia is to use Nettle, but Nettle does not have support for ML-DSA yet. So again, OpenSSL moving sort of fast here allowed us to meet this goal of having the bits ready by end of 2025. That is not something that we would have made in time if we had to rely on, for example, GNU-PG or Nettle. Right. Next, post-quantum cryptography and FIPS. So Red Hat Enterprise Linux does have an OpenSSL FIPS provider that is fully validated with a valid certificate that's based on what was shipped in OpenSSL 3.0.7. That still works with the current OpenSSL 3.5.1 that we ship, but it is obviously too old to contain post-quantum cryptography. On the other hand, the customers that ask for FIPS are also surprisingly the customers that shout loudest for post-quantum cryptography. So they are sort of in a I want my cake and eat it too situation. And going for a new certification of a OpenSSL FIPS provider that supports post-quantum cryptography will likely take us 1 or 2 years because of the large backlog at the FIPS certification program at the moment. And the government shutdown that's currently ongoing is probably not helping that either. So hybrid constructions can be at least a stopgap measure for this particular problem. There was a NIST publication 800.227 released on September 18th, so pretty recently, that explicitly says that hybrid constructions are okay. We have a downstream change in our OpenSSL that enables the use of hybrids if one part of the hybrid construction is FIPS certified if your system is in FIPS mode. OpenSSL upstream does not yet have this change. We're in discussions on how this should look like and whether upstream wants it or does not want it, but it's something we're actively discussing. So at the moment, with the validated FIPS provider, because we have a validated SECP 256 R1, this one is available in FIPS mode for those customers that want this to still get post-quantum safety and post-quantum security. Unfortunately, SECP 256 R1 ML-Chem 768 is not very widely used, and even on servers that support it, it will likely involve a hello retry request because the initial key share will likely not have that. So not great, but at least usable. And in the future, once we have ML-Chem validated, that will also make X25519 ML-Chem 768 usable because the ML-Chem part of it will be validated, even though X25519 is a key exchange mechanism that for some reason NIST considers not to be acceptable in FIPS mode. So that's good because essentially the rest of the internet uses X25519 ML-Chem 768. So that is a significant improvement in usability and compatibility with the internet. And again, none of this would have been possible without the OpenSSL providers API. So if we were using LibreSSL, none of this would have worked. Right. Okay, and finally, I'd like to talk about PQC hardware tokens. So for software signing, we want the signing key to be in a hardware security module, right? We do not want to end up in a situation where the key ever leaks, so it needs to be properly secured. Typically, these hardware security modules support PQCs 11 as an interface standard. PQCs 11 is a standard that's recently been updated or in the progress of being updated as a draft out now to add post-quantum crypto support. And we have Bob RHEL, who's on the RHEL crypto team, who's involved with Oasis to make sure that this fulfills their needs, and it does. And additionally, Red Hat is developing the PQCs 11 provider for OpenSSL that essentially bridges the gap between OpenSSL here and the hardware security module on the other hand. And how do you make one of them talk to the other? You install the PQCs 11 provider. And as of the PQCs 11 provider's 1.1 release, which was September 16th, so also pretty recently, it also supports PQCs 11 version 3.2, and that includes ML-DSA support. And we know because we've tried it, and this is actually what we will be using. Again, this would not have been possible without providers. Oh, I mean, I have to be honest here, engines could have done the same thing, so they were available before, but engines always required you to write special code to know that you were using engines, and with providers we can actually write code that is independent of whether the actual key is in software or in hardware. Right, so in summary, Red Hat has PQC available by default in TLS. We're working on making RPM signatures using Sequoia PGP with post-quantum cryptography. We have some limited support in FIPS mode. We have a way to talk to hardware security modules with PQCs 11. And a lot of this work would have been either not possible or a lot slower if it were not for OpenSSL's capabilities in version 3 and beyond. Right, and then short outlook, that's not on the slides, but here's the exclusive information for everybody who's listening to the audio track. The next steps that we're going to do is, now we have looked at TLS, but there's obviously a lot of use of asymmetric cryptography outside of TLS. So we're going to look at that next, probably over the next 2 years. We're going to tackle what needs updating, where do we maybe need to get involved in standardization because the standards are not updated. That will be a lot more effort, and it will take a lot longer, but we're taking a look at it now. Right, and with that, thank you. If you're wondering what the next step in your organization's transition to post-quantum crypto is, there's a QR code for you here on the right to an article by our Emily Fox, who talks about that. And did you know that you can leave speaker feedback for these presentations? If you did not, here's a QR code on the left to do that for this particular talk, and I would also encourage you to do that for all the other talks. And now we have 11 minutes for questions.
Thank you for the presentation. Could you talk a bit more on how you're planning to work with, because you mentioned them, dual stack of certificates between RSA and ML-DSA, please?
Yes, I can. So TLS supports an extension in the later versions where the client essentially announces which signature algorithms it supports, and an additional extension where it announces which signature algorithms it will accept in certificates. So a lot of libraries already on the server side support reading that extension and then returning a certificate that matches that. Typically, that has been used so far to do ECDSA and RSA dual setups. You can use the exact same functionality to do RSA and ML-DSA, for example. Now, it is mostly up to our customers how they will actually use it, but we want to make sure that this functionality is available and it is working. And it hasn't been super well tested because nobody really needed it, but now I think there's an opportunity. There are no public CAs using post-quantum cryptography at the moment. And that puts us into a bit of a problem down the road, because if your client announces that they have ML-DSA support, you do not know whether their certificate store also has the ML-DSA root certificate that you will be chaining to if you answer them. There is work ongoing at the IETF to address this problem. There is an extension to also send your entire CA set of trusted CAs that you have in your system, but that extension is a bad idea because it's a bad privacy leak. So there is work ongoing to address this, and we have a few other ideas on how to address this. No final solutions yet, but the problem is identified.
Thank you.
Hey, this is a really kind of a question that I'm really interested in, because I'm going to have the same problem. On the CNSA 2.0 slide you had, it gave a timeline for when you should be supporting these algorithms. But it also tells you when you should stop supporting the conventional algorithms. And is that on your roadmap? Are you going to be pulling away those conventional algorithms?
So we are in the fortunate situation that we have crypto policies. And our plan is to eventually write a crypto policy that allows you to turn off all the classic algorithms. This is an exceptionally bad idea if you're trying to talk to the internet, because things will break left and right. On the other hand, we already see with some of the crypto policy configurations that we have, for example, for common criteria certification, that require elliptic curves larger than 384 or RSA keys larger than 2048. We already see that interoperability with the internet is broken in these configurations. So we are going to make this available, but it will be specifically for those government customers that only have internal connections and can manage that kind of breakage.
Cool. Thank you for the presentation. I have a question. You mentioned that for Red Hat 10, you were essentially using the OQS provider. My understanding that it might not have been quite production-ready code. I think there was even some disclaimers in the code base about it. So I'm just curious, did you guys make any changes to it to make it more production-ready?
We looked at the code, of course. So we did not share some of the concerns, but we did see this, right? Our decision to move to OpenSSL's native implementation in 3.5.1 and mark post-quantum cryptography as technology preview in RHEL 10.0 was exactly because we did not want to support this particular code base for the next 10 years. So essentially, we marked it as, yes, this is available. It will eventually go away. Actually, if you upgrade to RHEL 10.1, it will automatically be uninstalled. It will no longer be on your system because OpenSSL is marked to replace it now. so yes, there was a concern. We were looking at maybe, for example, using libOQS in GNU TLS for post-quantum crypto support, and eventually decided against it because of concerns with long-term support of that library.
Question about Sequoia PGP OpenSSL provider access. Is it going to be solely for PQC, or will it also be used to access, for example, FIPS validated RSA, FIPS validated ECDSA?
So the support for PKCS11 that we're adding to Sequoia PGP will be able to be used with any of the classic algorithms as well. So we're already testing this. There was a talk by Jakub Yellen yesterday in this room where he talked about PKCS11 provider, and he also talked about Cryoptic, our software token, PKCS11 software token that's based on OpenSSL. And we are actually testing Sequoia PGP through PKCS11 with this Cryoptic software token with both classic and PQC cryptography.